So hey guys, this beautiful 85 928S arrived at the shop this morning, and it's got some electrical issues that we're going to be looking at. Alright, I got the cover off now, and I thought I'd do a very quick walk around. Again, this is an 85 928S, and it has a few electrical issues that we're going to be looking at. So this is a very clean car. The carpet pulled back here, and they got a few spare relays. We're going to be into that CE panel here in a moment. I'll go ahead and walk around to the driver's side here. Grab this paper mat here. Get it put down. Seats look very nice. So here's a list of the electrical issues this car is having, and I have the factory workshop manual with all the wiring diagrams here. Now I'm going to try and stay in order as they're written here. The first issue that we're having is the passenger window regulator is running all the time, even with the fuse pulled. Next, we've got the interior lights are shorted out and blows the fuse. And number 3, bright lights do not work. Replace the light switch and the headlight relay. Then we have the left hand turn signal will not work. I think the wires are switched around on the fuse relay board. And then we've got a current draw somewhere that's killing the battery within a week. So let's get started. So alright, before I dive into this, what I want to do is just sort of take a look at this stuff and get an idea of what's going on. The first thing on the list is, of course, to look why the regulator runs all the time. And so what I did was I put the key in the ignition here and turn it on. And the passenger side window seems to work perfectly fine. So let's go under and find fuse number 12 here. Give me a second to get settled. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12 right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a spare fuse here and stick it in here and see what happens. Alright, so that actually appears to be the mirror here and not the actual window regulator, which still works fine. So, alright, let me go around here. Yeah, what I figured. This switch here is wore out, just moving it back to the center, and now it has stopped. So that's the fix. I don't know that the switch is broken. It just seems to be a little worn, but we'll see if maybe we can find a replacement. But yeah, it's just getting stuck. Well, the more I've jiggled it and got all the crud out of it, it's not hanging up anymore. So that may have fixed this issue. There's supposed to be a cap on that, and I may have a spare one, but yeah, so that's fixed. I'll play with that switch, and that's actually the issue. So now that I've replaced that fuse, he should have reverse lights again, and I'll put a cap on that switch and see if I can't get some more of that crud out of there. And I'm glad that was an easy fix. So let's go on to the next thing here. We got the interior lights are shorted out and blows the fuse. So that is the next thing I want to look at here, and I don't know which fuse that is right off the top of my head, but it's got the interior lights dangling here, and I'm going to look up which fuse that is, and we'll look over and see if we can't find any reasons why that's blowing. So alright, according to this chart, the interior lights are on fuse number 24. Now I could of course just stick a fuse in there, but it's probably going to blow, and rather than waste the fuse, I thought we would first check continuity to make sure that we don't have any shorts. So I'm going to take this power wire here from this light and see if it's grounded out somewhere, and as you can see it is. So the next thing to do is go to the next light and see if it's the same way, and just go from there. So alright, next I'm going to do the driver's side door here the same way. Now of course this power supply likely comes from the same source as the other door, so if one's shorted out, they're probably all shorted out. But what I'm doing here is just looking for anything obvious, like if this boot here or this cover is missing and something's just grounding it out. So let me get my multimeter on here. And again, this one is shorted out as well. So next I'm going to do the overhead light. So here's the rear interior light, and unfortunately the wire slid straight out of these crimps, so I'll solder some new spade terminals on there. It did give me the opportunity to make sure that the wires were connected right though, and test them individually for shorts. And everything still looks good, except the power wire of course still has a short in it somewhere, and it just means I'm going to have to dig a little deeper. So next I'm going to check the wiring on this light here. See if someone has spliced into this, but it looks nice and clean. The wires appear to be in the correct spots. So let me pull this power wire here. And again, it's shorted. So I have all the positive wires from all the lights pulled, so wherever the short is, it's going to be somewhere most likely back in the dash. So since this wasn't something obvious, I'm going to actually come back to this later on, since I still have a whole list of things to go down, and right now I'm just trying to get a feel of where everything is. So the next thing I'm going to briefly look at is why the high beams do not work. So let me turn the lights on here. So as you can see, the high beams do not work, and he's already replaced the switch and the relay trying to figure out why. So this is probably going to take some digging to figure out exactly what's going on. So for now I'm just going to skip it, and we can come back when we have more time. What I want to do is just kind of get a good look at everything and figure out what's going to be the easiest fix, and then come back to it. So for now I'm going to move on to number 4, figuring out why the left-hand turn signal will not work. And I got the ignition switch on. Let me turn the left-hand turn signal on, and you can see the light on the dash is blinking rapidly, so that's a good sign. Go around back here. This light's working, so that's also a good sign. It might just be a blown bulb up here on the front. And see, we can just quickly knock that out. And it does appear that this one's blown, so that's why I just go ahead and just get a good idea of what's going on, and then for the harder things I just come back to them. But for now I'm going to try replacing that bulb and see if that fixes the issue. So I got some new bulbs here, and first thing I need to do is get this cover off. But before I can do that, I need to remove this here, and you can see there's a screw here and here. that just comes off like that. And you're now going to see another screw back here. Once those two screws are removed, then you can take the cover off. Now this bulb looks to be brand new. So hey guys, I'm out here working on this 928S again today, and last time I was working on this turn signal here and changed the bulb out, but the bulb was brand new. So I checked the wiring and everything's connected here and the ground is good. I went inside to the CE panel and checked the fuse. The fuse is good and there's power at the fuse. So there's a broken wire somewhere between the CE panel and this bulb here. So that's what we're going to be checking out today. I'm hoping that it's actually behind the CE panel, somewhere right around here. So hopefully I can just pull the CE panel out and it'll be an easy fix here. And as for the high beams, I went ahead and pulled the relay, and you can see here this 56 is where the high beams get its feed from, and there should be 12 volts here with the lights on. You can see the fuses and everything, and I'm not getting 12 volts there. So I'm gonna have to flip the CE panel over anyway to see why I'm not getting power to those. And I had gone ahead and pulled all the interior lights down and checked to make sure that nothing was shorting out on the body, and they all look good. So I'm hoping that when I flip the CE panel over, I'll find the short in there. If not, then I've got to start pulling the interior trim out and things like that, which I really don't want to do. I'm really hoping that this is going to be a simple fix and I don't have to start tearing the interior apart to dig in and find it. And other than that, let's get started here. As I mentioned, I'd have gone ahead and removed the relay for the headlights, and this is the 56 here that should have 12 volts with the lights on and everything, and this one here is for the low beams, and it does. So I've got to flip this over and figure out why I don't have 12 volts. Now a lot of times these spade terminals get pushed out when installing a relay, but I don't know if you can see it. It's in there and it appears to be fine. So that's the first thing I want to look at. And also I mentioned that the turn signal has power here, so I'm hoping that when I flip it over I can look on the wiring diagram and see where that wire connects to the bulb running to the front. And hopefully there's just an issue there, and also just an issue with the interior lights all hidden back here, and that would be nice. I'm not gonna not gonna bank on that, but it sure would be nice to just pull this out and then find all the issues back here. Alright, I now have the CE panel pulled out, and the first thing I noticed was these brown wires here connected to some relays with these crimp connectors, and they are grounded up at the firewall here. Now at the moment it doesn't appear that this has anything to do with the issues that I'm having, so I'll come back to those later. But as you can see, everything looks to be pretty nice and tidy. I just need to check over a few things. So the high beams aren't working and the left front turn signal isn't working, and if I look here, This is going to be fuse number 34 for the front turn signal. As you can see, there's not a wire on the back side there. There should be a wire that runs to the lights. If you look at the diagram here, you can see here's 34. So basically what I have here is it coming from the switch, and then it's stopping right there at the fuse. I do not have this wire that runs onto the lamp or the bulb. And there's 35. You see it has 2 wires on it. I don't think it needs 2 wires. If anything, this is the headlight relay here. If I'm not mistaken, that's 50A for the high beams. That belongs actually over here on 32. You can see 50A runs out and goes up to 32. So that should be on 32 here, but 32 already has a wire on it. I'm gonna go ahead and take this out because that does not belong there. That is for the rear turn signal and should not run to the headlight relay. That right there is going to explain why the high beams don't work. And this here should come off. And then again, there should be a wire on 34 that runs onto the lights, and now we have a loose wire, so I'm thinking that these just got swapped around a little bit. Try to pull this out and have a little bit more room with it. Anyway, now this goes to 32 over here. Like that, and I'm looking for a loose wire, and now I've got one. So let's try this one down on 34. It would explain why both the left front turn signal and the high beams aren't working. These just got mixed around. It's difficult to do this with one hand. I'm going to try and grab it with this and then get it lined up and put it on down in there. Isn't easy. There we go. Well, that should be it. Always try and grab it with the metal. Now let's go around. Let's see if we've got high beams and left front turn signal now. So I'm gonna grab the keys here. Alright, turn signal appears to be working. Let's go around. Let's see if that's fixed the issue. Yep. So the wire for the front turn signal here was actually on 32 for the high beams. Now let's see if we have high beams now. Turn the lights on and let me flip it forward for the high beams. And sure enough, they're working. If you can see that on film, I'll get down close to them. But yeah, that's the high beam. So 50 was on 35, so they weren't exactly quite mixed around, but 35 is the fuse for the left rear turn signal. So it was connected to this here, not doing anything apparently. So now I just need to figure out the interior lights. So I'm going to get started on that now. So alright, I now have the high beams and the front turn signal working. Luckily it was just something simple like the wires were swapped around here. I don't think I'm going to get that lucky for the next project here. The next thing I need to do is get the interior lights working. And I went ahead earlier and removed all the lights from the car, unplugged the red wire, and just made sure that nothing was shorting out. And I even checked the wiring and it all looks good. So I'm thinking that either I've got a short behind one of these panels in the car, or it's a short where someone's plugged something in wrong here. Now so far it all looks good, but we'll find out. Now I have all the bulbs listed here on this diagram, and hopefully I can isolate it since the door lights here and the glove box light are on one circuit, but the overhead lights and the trunk lights are on another circuit. So hopefully I can isolate and just figure out whether it's the door lights that are shorting or it's the overhead and trunk lights. At least that would give me some helpful ideas of where to look. But as for now, it looks like I got a long road ahead of me as I untangle some of this wiring and figure out what's going on with it. So alright, I'm trying to track down the issue that we're having with the interior lights. So far, whenever I put a fuse in number 24, it blows. So what I've done here was just try to isolate where the short could be. If you'll look here, then you can see that fuse number 24 runs to E. So I went behind the panel and tracked the wire down to E, and I unplugged it. And I did the same on this side. Now this side is supposed to run down and go to T, however my wire runs to S. That's not correct. So I went ahead and pulled S, and you want to be careful when you remove these plugs. As you can see, you have a tab here. So I'll give you a quick demonstration. You just want to lift up on this tab here, rock it back like that, and then gently pull it up like that. Just being careful, just a heads up on that. They are very fragile and you want to be very careful. But anyway, this is connected to S, and if you'll look at S, you can see there's a lot of ground wires on it. So what I'm thinking is they've got the other wire here plugged into a ground, and that's what's causing the fuse to blow. This side should work perfect, and I just need to probably switch this into the correct wire. But looking at this here, this is probably the grounds for those relays that they have spliced into and cut up and then attached to the firewall there. So that may fix two issues, but for now I have a light bulb on here, and let's plug in E and see what happens when we stick a fuse in there. So E should work now. I've got a little fuse here I'm going to put in, and we'll see how it goes. So alright, now the interior lights for the doors work anyway. Now I've got to go back there, figure out exactly where this goes, and then plug it in on the back side, and that should fix the overhead lights then. Alright, I've got the door lights working now, and they go on and off as they should when you close the door. So I'm pretty happy about that. Next, what I've got to do is flip the CE board over, unplug that wire that's running to the S plug there, and then put it in its proper spot, and hopefully that'll fix it. So alright, I've got the wire unplugged now, and this wire comes from fuse 24, and then it's supposed to run to the back of one of these plugs here, and this supplies power to the overhead and trunk lights, but unfortunately it was plugged into the wrong spot and was causing it to short out. If you're ever doing this job, then these forceps work great. You can just get down here and grab it by the metal and pull them right out. I used my multimeter to verify that I was putting the wire in the correct spot, and now we have overhead lights. So I can put these back in, and that's pretty much it. So alright, the next thing I'm going to do is solder some new connections onto this here. I want them to look good and last a long time. These crimp connections just pulled right out when I was messing with the light, just trying to verify that nothing was shorting out back here. All right, I now have this one soldered up and it looks great, so I'm going to go ahead and pop it back in. So, all right, I now have the interior lights working, and I thought since it was night, I would go ahead and show them to you. A little bit easier to see. They all work as they should and go on and off with the door, so that is fantastic. I thought that I would also show you the turn signal that works now, and also the high beams. So I have the high beams on and the left front turn signal working. So alright guys, then I'm going to be installing the CE panel, and as I do so, I'm going to be removing each one of these fuses and making sure that it has the correct one in there. Some of these have 2s and 5s, which are far too low, and then some of them have 30s when they shouldn't, because I just used some spare fuses that I had. But anyway, I'm going to try and get this cleaned up the best I can. I have some spare fuses here, and you may have noticed that I had these 3 relays removed. Now, when I first got the car, this relay was in this position here, and whenever I turned on the key, it made a loud humming noise and would get hot. And I went ahead and pulled it out because I knew something wasn't right. But the fuse for the interior lights, number 24, is also attached to this, which is the suppressor relay. And that was another reason why the fuse was blowing, because this relay for the automatic transmission kickdown was in this spot. So I went ahead and removed these, and as I was putting back in, I wanted to verify that I had it in the right spot. So actually the suppressor relay was in this position. So now they're swapped back into the correct positions, and hopefully that will get rid of the battery drain that we had as well, but I need to check that as well. But anyway, now these relays are where they belong, and as I mentioned, we'll get this CE panel put back in and all the fuses cleaned up, and this thing will be almost ready to go. So alright, now that I have all the wiring straightened out, I'm going to be checking to make sure that there isn't a current draw that's killing the battery. And I have my multimeter here, and the first thing I'm going to do is disconnect the ground from the battery. Now on the 928, it is located right here. All you need to do is remove this panel here, and you'll see a little butterfly bolt. And you just remove that, and now you have the ground strap here. And in normal operation, you're going to have your multimeter set up like this, but for this operation, you'll need to move your positive wire over here, and then you're going to turn it to 20 milliamps. And you're going to let the power run through your multimeter, and it's going to tell you how much draw that it has. Now keep in mind that I found one relay that was getting hot whenever you turn the key on, and a bunch of wires that were not in the correct spot, and that could have been killing the battery. So as you can see, there's absolutely no draw at all. Now you want to make sure that all your doors are shut and you have all the lights off, and you don't want to open the doors during this. It's easier to do the ground on this car. However, you can also do positive if you like, but keep in mind that if you're using the positive and you accidentally ground, then you could ruin your multimeter. So I would always suggest that you use the ground in any car. But now he shouldn't have anything draining his battery whatsoever. Now if his battery continues to die, then it's most likely that he has a faulty battery at this point. But probably what was killing it before was all that stuff that was miswired and relays out of place. So there we go, guys. Like I mentioned, I'm going to get the CE panel put back in, and we're going to take this car for a ride. Alright, I now have all the fuses in and everything is sorted out, As I mentioned, there were some 5s and 2s in here in places that really needed to have 15s and 30s. There was just a whole bunch of 5s running across here. So I went through and made sure that the correct fuses were in the correct spots now. So now I'm ready to close this up and we'll take it for a ride. Alright guys, just to recap here. The first thing I did was discover that the power mirror joystick over here was hanging up, and I said I was going to get a cap for it, and I have one here I'm going to put on. That looks a little bit better, and it should also help it keep from getting stuck over there and hanging up again. And then we moved on to see why the front left turn signal wasn't working. The first thing I did was remove the bulb, and even though he said it may have been a mix-up in the CE panel with the wiring, I just wanted to verify that it wasn't the bulb. And if I had to, what I could do was connect my multimeter to the inside of the bulb there and then trace the wire all the way back to the CE panel if there was one hanging loose. But that wasn't the issue. It was actually just plugged into the wrong spot. So either way, I needed to remove the bulb. And we also fixed the issues with the high beams not working. They were plugged into fuse 35, and I just needed to put it back on fuse 32, and that's where the front left turn signal was plugged in, so I moved it back to its correct spot on fuse 34. And then I had to make sure that the interior lights worked, so that was also a screw up in the panel. There were two reasons why the fuse was blowing. One was because it had the wrong relay plugged into that socket, and the wire for the overhead and trunk lights was plugged into a ground. And so I swapped that back into the correct position, and then I swapped the relays back into their correct spot, and that fixed the issue. And also, that relay for the automatic kickdown was getting hot and making a buzzing noise whenever you turn the key on. So that could have had something to do with both the battery running down or something like that. And when I tested the voltage to see if there was a battery drain, then I didn't find any. So alright guys, that should just about do it. Everything now works as it should, and I hope that gives you a good rundown. Now, before we go anywhere, I thought we would look under the hood here. So as you can see, this car has the 4-cam 32 valve engine. These engines made about 288 horsepower, and that's a little bit different than the other 928 that I have, which is only the 16 valve version, and they only made about 234. So anyway guys, let's take this thing out for a ride. I just got back from taking it around the block. The owner asked me to drive it and see if I noticed any issues with the engine skipping. Now to me the engine felt fine and very strong, but of course maybe some of those electrical gremlins were having an effect on the engine or something. There's no telling. The kickdown relay was not in the right place, and maybe that was some of the issue as well. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't drive the car before that, and maybe it wasn't shifting down when it needed to, but now it feels great. And you got to hear this engine. Alright guys, that's just about going to do it for this episode. Now I would be remiss if I didn't do a very quick review on this lovely 928. Now this is the first 928 that I've ever driven, so I'm not sure how they should feel, but I'll tell you this one felt very sporty. As you're driving, you can hear the engine growl, and you can also feel that big V8 under the hood just thumping away. Now, I wasn't really expecting to hear that engine roaring as I went down the road, or feel that big V8 thumping under the hood. I was really expecting this to be very much a grand tour and be sort of disconnected. But when I got home, I decided to drive my 924S back to back just to get an impression of how different these cars are. And actually, they were more similar than I'd ever thought. So the 928 has this very low, very smooth, but almost aggressive exhaust note the entire time you're driving. And I was actually surprised to see that the 924S was a lot quieter, so much that at certain speeds you couldn't even really hear the engine at all. Now, that said, when you're sitting at a red light, you can feel that big V8 lumping around under the hood, and it wasn't that bad, but even when you were driving, you just feel that engine thumping away. Whereas at certain speeds with the 924S, you don't really have any engine vibration at all. But sitting at a red light, you do sort of feel the engine at that big 4-cylinder pounding away as well. But I was shocked to see that I didn't really find an engine speed in the 928 that I couldn't feel that engine. Now, that may be because the engine mounts are wearing, but this is the first time I've ever driven a 928, and so this is just sort of my first impressions. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and